In their morning class, these students are reading the Lun Yu, the Analects of Confucius. The Analects, which has only 11,705 characters, is regarded as China's greatest book. It has had a significant influence in China and abroad. It is said, a man can rule China even if he only understands half of the Analects. The Analects radiates the spirit of Confucius. Bringing together Confucius' political opinions, his thoughts on ethics, his moral precepts, and the essence of the thinking of his disciples, it is one of the wellsprings of Chinese traditional culture.
论语里边这个做人的道理，这个处世的智慧，它已经沉淀为我们中华民族共同的一种心理，形成了我们一种生命底色。
在这以前，是一种以这个天命为主的这个思想，然后逐渐变化。而孔子他的价值，《论语》里边这个思想价值，就他开始建立了一个完全立足于人的人文主义的思想体系。所以从那个以后，从孔子以后，中国文化走了一个新的一条道路。
In 551 BC, in this dark, narrow cave, a baby boy was born. A concave dent in the newborn's head resembled Mount Nichu, so he was named Chu, or mountain. As his mother's second child, he was also called Junni, second. Out of respect for Confucius, later generations called the mountain simply Mount Ni to avoid calling it Chu, his given name. His birthplace, Chufu in Shandong province, became a place of pilgrimage. He was the founder of Confucianism, Kong-Tzu, known to the English-speaking world as Confucius. Confucius was born into a noble family that had fallen on hard times. His ancestry can be traced to Duke Min of Song, a state founded by Wei Tzu-chi, the elder brother of Di Xin, last king of the Qing Dynasty. In 710 BC, Confucius' family, the Kongs, were defeated in a power struggle in the state of Song. They fled to the state of Lu. According to legend, the village of Lu Yuan near Mount Ni on the outskirts of Chufu was part of Lu's Souyi County during the spring and autumn period. The village has a monument to Confucius, erected by the scholar Kang Youwei in 1924. Confucius' father, Kong He, served as a military officer in Souyi County. He was already in his 60s when he married Confucius' mother, Yan Zhengsai. He died when Confucius was only 3. Confucius' mother moved into Chufu, where she raised her son in poverty. This was where Confucius spent most of his life.
因此啊，可以想象，那么孔子，那么这个小时候啊，这个在他这个母亲的带领下，这个成长的这种环境，所以呢，这个孤儿寡母啊，这个应该说是这个非常艰难的。
The prime minister of the state of Wu once observed to Confucius' disciple Tse Gung, "Is your master not a sage? How then does he have so many menial skills?" On hearing this, Confucius said, "I was born poor and had to work hard to survive." During the spring and autumn period, farming and other manual labor were done by commoners and domestic servants. The nobility held jobs like these in disdain. In his youth, Confucius had to make his living from menial tasks, so he mastered many basic skills and acquired a great deal of knowledge. He also personally experienced the sufferings of the lower classes and understood their needs. Under his mother's guidance, Confucius studied hard from childhood. While other children were playing, Confucius was learning the ceremonial rites. He would put food into ritual containers, then practice the ancient rituals. From the age of 15, he was determined to improve his social standing by working hard at his studies. Nobles of the time had to study rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and numeracy. These skills were called the 6 arts, or liu li. Li, rites, was the knowledge of ethical conduct and the performance of rituals. Ye, music and dance in ceremonies. Shi, archery and its related etiquette. Yu, charioteering and horse riding. Shu, calligraphy. And Shi, arithmetic and the skills of divination. All 6 arts were essential for a nobleman, but Confucius regarded Li, rites, as the most important of all.
周礼300种，义礼3000种，主要是5种：祭、凶、君、家、宾。祭礼就是说像成人礼过年过节凶就是丧礼死了人的礼节。君礼就是打仗以前来实施，打仗后来献求，歌颂胜利祭、凶、君、家什么？家就是婚礼。宾诸侯之间朝聘，诸侯向天子见他个别见你叫见，很多人见叫朝。这5种礼里头，每一个又分很多很多，所以号称周礼300，义礼3000。孔子就提倡这个礼。
Confucius was born and grew up in the state of Lu, a Zhou vassal state founded by Duke Wen at the start of the Zhou dynasty. Duke Wen was a conscientious ruler who promoted a patriarchal society and encouraged his people to practice Li, the rules of propriety. These doctrines were adopted and practiced by his descendants. The state of Lu became the eastern center of Western Zhou civilization, where the practices and norms of the Zhou dynasty were largely maintained. The people of Lu observed moral standards, practiced etiquette, and respected tradition. They developed a culture unique to the state of Lu. In the turmoil of the spring and autumn period, the Zhou rules of propriety were abandoned in other states, but not in Lu. When Han Che visited Lu in 540 BC as an ambassador from the state of Qin, he declared, "Lu is the only state that has continued to practice the Zhou dynasty rites." In Lu, there was a vast library of books on Zhou rites, values, and etiquette, which Confucius avidly read. He even went to Eastern Zhou to study with Lao Tzu, a curator at the National Library. The state of Lu was the ideal place for Confucius to learn from past dynasties and enrich his knowledge. There, he went from hardship as a child to scholarship as a young man. He respected the traditions of the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. He practiced the Zhou rules of propriety. He cared about people and their lives, and he wanted to realize his goals through politics. Young and eager, Confucius was ready to embark on a political career.
孔子呢，他一生是祖属尧舜宪章文武，就是要恢复社会的正常秩序，所以他就提出来礼。这礼本来就是一种向祖先供奉的这么一个物品，后来变成人际之间交往的物品，后来就变成一个意识形态的东西了。 啊，就是人们之间的礼貌礼节。
The Analects records how Confucius scrupulously followed the rules of propriety every day. He never wore red or purple underclothes or casual dress. In summer, he would wear a light garment indoors, but always wore a robe when going out. He would only eat food that was finely cut and harmoniously blended. He would not eat anything that was not properly prepared. In 481 BC, his gifted and favorite disciple, Yan Hui, died young. Confucius was filled with grief. Yan Hui's father begged Confucius to sell his carriage so that he could use the money to buy an outer coffin for his son. Confucius replied, "Even when my own son, Kong Li, died, I did not sell my carriage to buy him an outer coffin." By then, Confucius had served as a minister and believed it would be improper for him to travel on foot. There were those who believed that Confucius was stubborn and petty-minded. Some still believe that today. But Confucius was not blind in his conformity to ritual. To him, what mattered most was heartfelt sincerity, not extravagant display. He believed a simple ceremony was preferable to a lavish one, and that what really counted was the thoroughness of the mourning.
有的人说孔子顽固，啊，现在社会变了，用旧礼，不是那样。孔子曾经说呢：“礼云礼云啊，予不云乎的，月云，终不云乎的。”你说礼呀礼呀，难道就是献个玉献个贝吗？主要是对你敬奉那个人的恭敬。乐呀乐，难道就是撞钟敲鼓吗？不是，通过这个撞钟敲鼓呢，来完成这个礼的这个制度。
Confucius promoted the Zhou rules of propriety, which required a man to respect his elders and those of senior rank. He also revised the Zhou rules and developed them. He believed that the rules of propriety should apply to people of all social classes. He considered virtue and benevolence, or ren, to be the essence of Li, the rules of propriety.
孔子把治国平天下、解决当时的天下大乱的情况，把希望寄托在哪里呢？他寄托在提高人的素质。
孔子曾经说啊，说人而不仁如礼和，人而不仁如乐和。人如果没有遵守礼的那种自觉、那种素养，那么礼乐秩序怎么办呢？
一个人闹不起来，两个人之间就存在人际之间关系了。人际之间关系怎么办呢？就用仁来解决。
Confucius believed in compassion and caring for people. When the stables at Lu caught fire, Confucius asked, "Was anyone hurt?" He did not ask about the horses. For him, the ability to love and care for people was fundamental. Confucius once criticized Guan Zhong, Prime Minister of the state of Qi, for his lack of propriety, but he later praised him for helping Duke Huan of Qi bring unity and order to the entire realm. Seeing the peace and stability the people enjoyed as a result, Confucius exclaimed, "Whose benevolence was like his? Whose benevolence was like his?" Confucius believed that only those who first respected their parents would be able to love others. Anyone who failed to respect his parents would lack virtue and would be unable to observe the rules of propriety.
这个人的本意其实就是修身，就是修己，就是反省自身。那么人只有反省自身，才能这个自觉地按照该做的去做。所以孔子有一句话，他说：“仁者，仁也，亲亲为大。”他说仁爱的人就是我们这个做人的人， 只要是我们作为一个人，就应当有爱心。那么有爱心的表现啊，就是亲亲，亲亲就是孝亲，就是孝敬父母。
Confucius regarded the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties as patterns of nobility and benevolence. Before them, China had been Da Tung, a society of equals with leaders chosen for their ability. The Xia dynasty had replaced this with patriarchal rule at every level. Kings from all three dynasties, Yu the Great of Xia, Tang of Shang, Wu and Chang of Zhou, and especially the legendary Duke of Zhou, had laid down new rules and norms for everyday life that had made China Shaokang, or peaceful and prosperous. The earlier Da Tung society was long gone, but Confucius believed China could return to a Shaokang society, even though the Zhou norms had been all but abandoned by the late spring and autumn period in which he lived.
所以孔子希望重整礼乐秩序。那么这种礼乐秩序显然啊，这个从夏商周以来，特别是这个文武周公，那么这是中国的礼乐社会。
But the etiquette established to suit the social order and political structure of Western Zhou was increasingly anachronistic in the late spring and autumn period. Not only was the power of the Zhou kings in decline, but their feudal lords were breaking away. Powerful figures such as Duke Huan of Qi and Duke Wen of Jin became overlords. The Zhou kings reigned by their grace and favor. Ministers from noble families began to seize power in each state, with their rulers too becoming mere figureheads. Ministerial advisors, previously confined to the domestic affairs of their states, began playing a part in the political life of the whole country. Many states, such as Lu, Jin, and Qi, saw struggles for power between the nobility and their nominal ruler. In the late spring and autumn period, three noble families held power in the state of Lu: the Jisun family, the Shusun, and the Mungsun, known collectively as the Three Huan. The Jisun family was the most powerful. The state of Jin was controlled by ministers from six families: Fan, Zhonghang, Zhe, Jiao, Wei, and Han. The Duke of Jin became the figurehead of these six ministers, and they also controlled the state of Lu. The state of Qi was controlled by the Chen family. Other vassal states were also under the control of ministers from the nobility. In 517 BC, Duke Zhao of Lu tried to regain power from the ruling minister Ji Pingce. He failed and was sent into exile. Unable to win support from the states of Qi and Jin, he never returned to Lu. 7 years later, he died in Jin. His son was never able to claim his dukedom. In 504 BC, the head of the Ji family, Ji Huanse, was imprisoned by his advisor, Yang Hu. The state of Lu remained under Yang Hu's control for 3 years. According to the Zhou rules, ministers were limited to having 16 dancers perform in their homes. But the ruling minister of Lu, from the Jisun family, ignored this. He had 64 dancers, a number reserved for the king. This angered Confucius, who said, "If this can be tolerated, then there is nothing in the world that cannot be tolerated." As power drained away from the king to the feudal lords, the Zhou rules of propriety fell into disuse. A famous story tells of the time that Confucius and his disciples were traveling past Mount Tai, There they saw a woman sobbing in front of a grave. Confucius sent a disciple to ask what had caused her such grief. The woman answered, "My father-in-law was savaged to death by a tiger, and so was my husband. Now my son has also been killed by a tiger." Confucius asked her, "Why don't you leave this place?" The woman answered, "Here there is no tyranny." Confucius said to his disciples, "Tyranny is worse than the attack of a savage tiger." Confucius hated tyranny and disliked any action that violated the Zhou rules of propriety. He was appalled by the political turmoil and social chaos caused by feuding rulers. He believed that oppressing the poor led to political upheaval and social instability. Confucius lamented the loss of social norms and moral values established centuries earlier by the Duke of Zhou. He said, "The Zhou dynasty was so rich in culture. I am a follower of the Zhou." He believed that the class structure established under the Western Zhou had created the ideal society. The Duke of Zhou in particular was his lifelong exemplar. He also believed that he could establish an ideal society modeled on the Zhou system if he had the opportunity. But he was not very successful in his political pursuits. While awaiting his chance to enter politics, he took on many jobs. He worked for the Ji family as a bugler, a shepherd, and a bookkeeper. Unable to break into the upper class, he began working as a teacher. Then in 501 BC, Yang Hu tried and failed to overthrow the Ji family, one of the three families ruling the state of Lu. Yang Hu fled, and this gave Confucius, now in his 50s, a chance to embark on his political career at last. The following year, he was appointed Minister of Public Works and then Minister of Justice. He wanted to weaken the three ruling families by demolishing the walls surrounding their estates. But by threatening the family's power, his ambitious plan was doomed to failure. In 497 BC, a disappointed Confucius left the state of Lu and set out on a journey that would last 14 years. He traveled to the states of Wei, Cao, Sung, Jin, Qin, Sai, and Chu. Traveling from state to state, he experienced many hardships. While passing through the town of Quang, he was imprisoned, and he was also detained in Pu County. He had to flee the state of Sung after offending a minister. He nearly starved on his way from Qing to Sai. When he got lost after being separated from his disciples in the state of Zheng, he was mocked as a stray dog. He served briefly as a low-ranking official in the courts of Wei and Qin. While most men of his age were enjoying their twilight years, Confucius still wanted to pursue a political career. Calling himself a man of all states, he traveled from state to state looking for opportunities to serve in government. But he failed to win a position anywhere that would allow him to bring his plans to fruition. In every state, nobles and ministers were forming alliances and fighting internal battles. There was also constant warfare between the states. Confucius had hoped to restore the authority of the king. He wanted virtuous rulers who listened to people's grievances and improve their lives by lowering taxes. But the nobles and ministers ignored him. In 484 BC, after 14 years of drifting from state to state, the 68-year-old Confucius finally returned to the state of Lu. Owing to his advancing years and his lack of success, he gave up on his dream of a political career and spent his remaining years teaching. In the late spring and autumn period, there was a distinct social class of decayed gentry. While they were educated, their social standing and living conditions were similar to those of commoners. These nobles who had come down in the world made up the She class, and Confucius was one of them. Having a noble family background offered him no advantages. But hardship and life experience made him resilient and broadened his vision. Confucius recruited students from all social classes. He would teach anyone who could afford to give him 10 slices of dried meat.
那么孔子啊，他向往这个三代之治。所谓三代，是指的夏、商、西周。在三代时期啊，这个叫学在官府。所谓学在官府啊，就是教育实际上就是这个官府垄断。那么在这个时候，那么这个如何培养人才，如何培养社会的管理人才，那么这个有关怀的人啊，他们在思考这样的问题。那么孔子显然是其中的代表。
Confucius thought so highly of his disciple Ran Yung that he declared, "Yung may be permitted to sit facing south." Facing south was a metaphor for occupying the throne. Succession to the throne was hereditary in Confucius' time, and all official positions were held by aristocrats and their offspring. The American sinologist Hurley Glessner Creel believed Confucius' comment was highly significant. He thought it was not merely a compliment, but the announcement of one of the most important revolutionary political principles.
孔子的《论语》里边讲的君子，他提出来的，这是一个理想的人格的目标。那么这个君子和小人的区别，他有很多地方讲君子如何如何，小人如何。他主要不是从地位上讲，主要是从一个人的这个 道德修养，是吧？人品，从这个角度，
君子的本意，它实际上是对于贵族男子和这个为政者的通称。那么这个君子，你看那个从文字上就能看出来。那么上面啊是一个手拿着个东西，那是引，那个拿的那个东西实际上就是权杖，下边这个口是发号施令。所以君子的本意是对于统治者和贵族男子的通称。 那么后来呢，指道德高尚。
It wasn't until the Analects appeared that the concept of the jinsa was broadened. Confucius expanded the definition to include moral standards such as loyalty, trustworthiness, benevolence, and perseverance. Anyone who met these standards was a jinsa, regardless of social status.
所以呢，就是君子的本意和引申义之间这种联系，那么就是孔子他的教育的一种内涵所在。就是说，因为你地位高，所以呢你责任大。你既然是这个尊贵的人，你就应该是高尚的人。所以你作为一个管理者，那么你就应该道德高尚。所以儒家讲正者正也，是吧？其身不正，虽令不从。那么其身正， 不令而行。
Confucius and his disciples also expanded the concept of she, originally a term of address for minor nobles, so that it also came to mean a code of ethics. A she should be committed to truth. He should be upright and willing to help others. a She would sacrifice his life to preserve his virtue. He should not live a life of indulgence. Only those who manifested Zhense behavior and values could be called She.
孔子呢，他培养人才啊，实际上是培养的一个士人，培养了一种君子人格。孔子曾经说啊，他说：“士之于道，而此恶以恶食者，谓诸于义也。”他说一个士人呀，必须有追求，有信念。如果他是一个有追求、有信念的人，那么他就不会啊斤斤计较于生活的琐事，穿的不好、吃的不好就没面子了，不会的。
Tradition has it that Confucius had 3,000 disciples. 72 of them were outstanding. Most of these came from poor backgrounds but worked their way up to high positions. During the Western Zhou dynasty and later the Spring and Autumn period, ministerial advisors largely came from the She class. In the late Spring and Autumn period, members of the lowest social classes started to move up into the She class. This group gradually acquired significant political influence. What they relied on was not their family origins, but their own political abilities. The disciples of Confucius became the pioneers of the She class. According to legend, Confucius taught hundreds of students under a maidenhair tree in his courtyard. He was the first person in Chinese history to open a private school, to take teaching as a profession, and to make education available to all. Modeling themselves on Confucius, scholars began to teach across many states. Commoners with outstanding academic achievements aspired to pursue careers in government. Gradually, education allowed more and more people to obtain government posts. During the Warring States period, the She class played an important role in political affairs. It was largely made up of minor nobles and educated commoners. The 6 classic texts used and revised by Confucius in his teachings were the Classic of Poetry, the Classic of History, the Classic of Rites, the Book of Changes or I Ching, the Classic of Music, and the Spring and Autumn Annals.
中国有这个传统，就得通过解经、注经来发挥自己的思想，所以这个6经对于中国的我们讲的统治思想的形成起了很重要的作用。就是经学史，中国的经学史的源头就要归到6经。这个6经实际上在孔子以前已经有，孔子呢，他的工作是对他进行整理，这是对传承中国文化他做了一个很重要的贡献。
In the last 4 years of his life, one tragedy after another struck Confucius. In 483 BC, his son Kongli died. Being a poor man, Confucius could only give him a simple funeral. Then in 481 BC, his favorite disciple Yan Hui also died. Grief-stricken, Confucius cried out, "The heavens want to destroy me! The heavens want to destroy me!" In 480 BC, Lu, his most capable disciple, was killed in battle in the state of Wei. His body was hacked to pieces and pickled. Overcome with grief at Lu's death, Confucius ordered all such meat in his house to be thrown away for fear of being reminded of Lu's brutal fate.
那么孔子弟子很多，那么也有比较亲近的弟子，比如说颜子、颜回，比如说子路，比如说子贡，比如说子张等等。那么这些弟子啊，这个每个人都有不同的特点。这些弟子，那么在对孔子的理解可能也有侧重， 但是呢，这些人和孔子啊，那么他们朝夕相处啊，这个形成了很深的感情。
In 479 BC, Confucius composed a song. Huge mountains wear away, alas. The strongest beams decay, alas. And the sage like grass withers, alas. On hearing the song, his disciple Gung traveled to see him. Confucius said, "Why have you left it so late to come? There are no more wise kings, no rulers want to listen to me. I am about to die." And 7 days later, Confucius passed away at the age of 73. Confucius modeled himself on the Duke of Zhou. His dream was to emulate the political and cultural achievements of his hero. Sadly, his dream never came true, and he spent most of his life wandering from state to state. But he is to be admired for his dedication and perseverance in the face of hardship. For 3 years after the death of Confucius, his disciples wore dark clothes of mourning. Gung mourned for over 6 years. At the time, the custom of wearing mourning was only practiced by sons and daughters for their parents, or by officials for their kings. Even they would not mourn publicly for 3 whole years. For his disciples to do so demonstrates the high regard they had for Confucius.
这里边折射出来的是一种师生的一种情感。那么孔子和他弟子的这种情感啊，那么也成为中国传统中那么师生关系处理的一种样板。
The Analects is a collection of sayings and ideas attributed to Confucius and his disciples. Comprising 20 books and 492 chapters, it is one of the major sources for understanding Confucian philosophy. During the Qing Dynasty, the philosopher Zhu Shi selected the Analects as one of the 4 books to be studied by aspiring scholar officials. At its core, Confucian philosophy advocates benevolence, the rules of propriety, justice, intellect, and trust. The Analects had a major impact on the formation of Chinese cultural identity and helped shape the social and moral fabric of the nation.
用梁漱溟先生的话说，那么孔子把他以前的中国文化都集中在他的手里，孔子以后的中国文化差不多都从孔子那里出来。显然，《论语》啊，它代表了孔子的一些这个对人生、对社会、对修身做人的一种看法。所以呢，就是说啊，它是我们上古文化的一种结晶。
现在我们讲世界4大文明，是吧？儒学、佛教、基督教、伊斯兰，这4大文明大体上都是在这个时期里边形成的。所以我们从这个角度讲，就是说，儒学，是吧？它是和那三大宗教并列的，现在的影响人类最大的4大文明之一。所以它是不仅是中国人的至圣先师、万世师表，它整个人类文明的一个代表之一。
孔子的思想啊，就是说2000多年对中国这个历史发展影响很大，同时它也传播的周边的国家。这个你像这个韩国，我讲朝鲜，就整个东亚地区吧，孔子的思想这个实际上是在整个东亚去儒学都是占据主导的问题。
Confucius was not only a great philosopher, but also a great educator. As scholars have argued, there have been many teachers since ancient times, but Confucius is one of the few whose personal influence and teaching of the young have changed the course of human history. Many of his disciples became teachers themselves. By the Warring States period, Confucianism had become the dominant school of thought. During the Western Han Dynasty, Emperor Wu advocated Confucianism over all other philosophies. With that, Confucianism became the mainstream of Chinese social and political thought. Confucius is not only a major figure in Chinese civilization, he also made a remarkable contribution to world civilization.